My family mocked me for a birthday card, so I shut off their power, revoked 12 accounts, and sold the home they lived in rent-free for 8 years. My name is Noah. I turned 30 last week. I wasn't expecting much for my birthday. I'd become accustomed to simple celebrations, just a slice of cake at my desk, maybe a movie if I wasn't too exhausted. Still, I hoped this year would be different. I'm not sure why. Maybe because 30 felt large, as if they'd finally recognized me as more than simply the help. The invitation arrived over the family group chat 2 days earlier. Mom, Sunday dinner is at 6 o'clock. Nothing spectacular, but stop by if you can. There was no happy birthday text, no cake emoji, just if you can, as if I had something more important to accomplish. And perhaps I did. I went anyway. I always did. I arrived precisely on time. They resided in the same house I had been paying the mortgage on since I was 22, after Dad lost his job and Mom's hours were reduced. I'd taken on side jobs, freelanced throughout college, and ate noodles so they wouldn't have to. I told myself it was only temporary, until they got back on their feet. That was 8 years ago. The house still looked the same. Paint peeling near the porch. Garden neglected. My younger brother Caleb's beautiful new Jeep stood in the driveway. His mother always told him he needed wheels to keep motivated. I was still driving the used Honda I purchased junior year. The door opened before I could knock. Caleb smiled and clapped me on the back as if he had just welcomed me into his party. Yo, about time. We already started eating. I walked into the dining room and everyone was already halfway through their lunch. My plate sat at the far end of the table, chilly. Nice of you to show, Dad murmured, not looking up. He reached for the potatoes and delivered them directly to Caleb. I sat down without speaking. No one wished me a happy birthday. Not Mom, Dad, Caleb, or my Aunt Denise, who somehow always gets invited despite once saying I looked emaciated and underachieving. I waited, hoping they were reserving something for dessert. A candle, a card, anything. Instead, once the plates had been cleaned, Mom dug into her purse and handed me a small white envelope. Don't expect too much, she added without smiling. You still haven't earned it. I froze. I hadn't even opened the letter yet, and the tone was already stinging. Caleb laughed across the table. It's probably a coupon for some therapy. God knows you need it. I opened the card. It was one of those generic drugstore ones, blue and white with a cartoon of a dog wearing a hat. Inside, someone scribbled in black pen. Happy birthday, family leech. Perhaps this year you'll mature. There were no signatures. No, love Mom and Dad. Just that. My hands remained still. My chest felt hollow, like someone had vacuumed out all the air. I looked up. Mom drank her wine. Dad was picking something out of his teeth. Caleb was smirking at his phone as if he hadn't just helped gut his older brother. Dad then added without looking at me. Honestly, we should have cut you off years ago. You act like we owe you something. I did not say anything. I did not yell. I did not cry. I nodded slowly because at that moment something in me shattered, not in rage or agony but in clarity. They didn't even know. They had no idea I had been covering their car insurance for the last 3 years. That I had been paying Mom's medical copays directly to the pharmacy. That I had paid the last tax penalty so they wouldn't lose the house they were now insulting me in. They had no idea about the spreadsheet I updated weekly to keep track of every penny. They didn't know because I never requested credit. But perhaps that was the issue. Dinner concluded with the customary sighs, and Caleb asked if I could Venmo him for the difference on some tickets he said he had fronted, for a trip I never took. I nodded again. I said I would take care of it because I didn't want to destroy my own plan by blowing out too soon. I got into my car and waited for 20 minutes, simply watching the porch light flicker. My fingers hovered over the ignition, but my mind was elsewhere, perhaps 8 years ago, recalling the first night I deposited money for their mortgage and convinced myself it was for love, not necessity. That night I unlocked my laptop. I did not sleep. I just started clicking. Passwords, login, old files, bank websites. Freeze here. Deny access there. I did not get angry. I did not type in all caps. I moved like a surgeon. I didn't just pull the plug. I completely rewired the circuit. Mom's pharmacy account? Disabled. Auto payments? Terminated. Joint utility login? Revoked. Every family Amazon account, Spotify profile, Netflix profile, and Uber Eats card that was ever tied to me? Gone. And I gave them one final present. One last message on the family group chat. But before I pushed send, I stared at the screen for a long time, rereading what I had written. There was no yelling in there, no cursing, no lengthy speech on how they had failed me or broken my heart. Because I realized, they didn't care if any of this happened to them. Not really. If I wanted them to feel the same way I did, shock, quiet, and a gradual sinking horror, I needed to speak in their language. Money. So I kept it short. All payments made on your behalf are revoked effective immediately. You called me a leech, so I assumed I'd cease eating. Good luck out there. Then I pressed send. No emojis. No signature. Just that. I muted the chat and shut down my laptop. I did not get up at 6:30 a.m. on Monday as I typically do. I took a day off. I slept in, made proper coffee, and went on a walk. I sat in the sun, trying to recall the last time I did anything without first checking whether Mom's copay had been posted or Dad's mobile bill had bounced again. I had a void in my chest that I had no idea I was missing. It felt like breathing air that didn't belong to anyone else. By lunchtime, I had 3 missed calls from Caleb. By 2 p.m., the group discussion had switched from silent to terrified. Mom, Noah, the internet's down. Can you check to see if you have paid the bill? Caleb, hey, why is the power off? Dad is ranting and I am literally missing business calls. Aunt Denise piping in from Florida. This feels very petty, Noah. We've always supported you emotionally, even if we had our disagreements. I did not respond. I read them one by one. I watched the tone change from smug confusion to mild annoyance, then terror. At 3:41 p.m. I received a call from Dad. I let it ring. He called again, this time using Mom's phone. Then again, it's an unknown number. I finally answered the 4th call just to see what tone he used. Noah, he said quietly at first. We need to talk. I did not say anything. Your mother's been crying, he said as if to guilt me into something. Nonetheless, I said nothing. I just think it's childish to pull the rug out from under your family. I mean, fine, you don't want to be part of things. That's your choice. But we had systems in place. You can't just cancel things without warning. You're right, I finally admitted. I should have warned you. He paused. So you'll fix it? No, I replied. I should have warned you 8 years ago when I started paying for everything, when I let you insult me with your mouths while living off my back. But I didn't. And that's on me. There was a prolonged hush. Then Dad said, you've always been so dramatic. I smiled. And you've always been entitled. Then I hung up. There's no screaming or theatrics, just a quiet click. That night, I received an email notice from the mortgage server. Another person has modified your account's login. They tried to get inside. I had already locked it. And I wasn't finished yet. The next day, I completed the papers to have my name removed from any joint accounts I'd ever been added to. I called every company and mailed every document. I even created a spreadsheet with all of the account numbers I'd been linked to throughout the years just to make sure I hadn't forgotten any. Then I started browsing through property records. Because, you see, the house was not in their name. It was inside mine. It has always been. 8 years ago, when they were too far in debt to qualify for a mortgage, I purchased the house in my name. I told them it was a family solution to keep the roof over their heads. I led them to assume it was theirs. I let them decide the rules. I allowed them to disrespect me in a house that I legally owned. But I was not going to make that mistake again. 2 days later, I scheduled an appointment with a real estate attorney. Quiet, professional, with no drama. I detailed the scenario, showing the deeds, payment history, and letters. He looked at me and said, you've got every right to do this. I nodded. He leaned back in his chair and asked, do you want to evict them or sell the house completely? That was the turning point. That's when it became less about punishment and more about freedom. I did not respond right away. Instead, I opened my phone. I scrolled through years of family texts, images, passive-aggressive jokes, guilt trips, and reminders to help out because we're struggling. Then I went back to the birthday card. Perhaps this year you'll mature. I grinned at the attorney and said, let's list it. The house went on the market a week later, quietly. There's no for sale sign on the lawn. No warning was sent in the group conversation. Just a discreet listing with the attorney's approved realtor. She was bright, efficient, and not the kind to inquire about personal matters when you responded. Yes, I own the house. No, they didn't know that yet. We arranged the first walkthrough for Tuesday afternoon. I chose a time when I knew Mom would be at her monthly church volunteering shift and Dad would be out at one of his interminable networking lunches, which never seemed to result in a job. Caleb, as usual, was presumably gaming upstairs while wearing noise-canceling headphones. The realtor brought in a couple with their little kid. They were polite. The wife looked around the kitchen and commented, it has potential, doesn't it? I could hear her tone as she imagined repainting the cabinets and pulling down the ugly half-wall. The husband inquired about the HVAC and roof. I had my answers ready. After all, I had already paid for both repairs last year. About halfway through the tour, I heard a door crash upstairs. Caleb thudded down the hallway in socks, unbrushed hair and PJ trousers. He looked from me to the pair then back again. What's going on?" he asked, frowning. The small girl smiled and waved to him. The wife said, "Sorry, is this a bad time?" "We didn't realize." Caleb turned to me and asked, "Dude, why are people walking through the house?" I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I looked around the living room where I had sat numerous evenings throughout college, laptop on my knees, attempting to stretch my freelancing work just enough to afford another month's expenditures. Then I turned to Caleb and said, "It's not your house, Jace. It never was." The realtor stepped in swiftly, allowing the couple a quick view to the backyard while I handled the details. They nodded and walked outside. Caleb's face became red. "Okay, what does that mean?" I raised an eyebrow. "Exactly what it sounds like. This house is under my name legally. I've been paying the mortgage and I've decided to sell it." He blinked once, twice. Then he laughed quickly, astonished. "You're joking." "Nope. That's not even, like, you can't do that, dude. Mom and Dad live here." "Correct. And they've been living here rent-free while calling me a leech and handing me birthday cards with insults inside." He opened his mouth but nothing came out. He appeared suddenly quite youthful. "You really didn't know?" I inquired. "After all this time?" Caleb shakes his head. "They always said they own the house. That they let you live here sometimes out of pity." I stared at him. "You thought I was living here out of pity?" He scratched the back of his neck and glanced aside. "I mean, you never had friends over. You never brought girls around. You were always working, always stressed. Because I was paying for everything so you could sit in your room and stream video games." He gulped hard as if the math was beginning to click. We then heard the front door open. Mom. She walked in with a half-empty cup of iced coffee, conversing on the phone. She hadn't seen the realtor or the couple in the backyard yet, only me and Caleb in the living room. "Oh, Noah, are you finally fixing the sink?" Because she then observed his look. "What's wrong with you two?" I didn't respond. She took a step closer and narrowed her gaze. "What's going on?" Caleb turned near her, his voice low. "Mom, did you know Noah owns the house?" The pause that followed felt like the universe was holding its breath. Mom's face did not twitch, not 1 inch. Then she carefully lowered her glass and added, "Caleb, don't be ridiculous. We let him sign the papers because his credit score was higher, but that doesn't mean he owns it." I smiled. She still didn't understand it. "The deed is in my name," I explained quietly. "I made the down payment. I've been paying the mortgage. This isn't your house." Her face twitched. Nor fear nor despair, but wrath. "You ungrateful little, how dare you try to throw your parents out of their own home?" she yelled. I did not flinch. "Mom, you threw me out first. You've been throwing me out piece by piece for years. When you laughed at my job, when you called me a disappointment in front of your friends, when you used my money and told people I was a failure." She crossed her arms. "So this is revenge? You're evicting your family on your birthday?" I laughed once dryly. "This isn't revenge. This is closure." The realtor then stepped back in with the couple, smiling cordially. "We just love the layout," said the lady, "and the backyard's perfect. I think we'll put in an offer." Caleb looked at Mom. She stared at me and I reflected about the future I should have claimed years ago. Mom did not talk again. Not right away. She simply stared at me as if I were a stranger who had broken into her living room. Caleb stood behind her, quiet now, his smug grin gone. The pair was discussing offer conditions and caveats with the realtor as if they were talking about draperies and countertops, not the implosion of the family that was still nominally living there. I went outside to give them room and waited at the mailbox, hands in my pockets, watching the wind ruffle the weeds in the front yard that I used to mow. A minute later, the realtor joined me. "They're ready to move forward," she remarked. "They love the place. Good offer above asking. They can waive the inspection if needed." I nodded. "Let's do it." She tilted her head slightly. "Are you sure you're okay with all this?" I gazed at her. She wasn't being inquisitive. She was only doing her job, ensuring that the seller wasn't about to withdraw out for emotional reasons. When family was involved, many people questioned their own actions. But I did not. "I've never been more sure of anything," I claimed. By the time I returned inside, Mom had moved her meltdown into the kitchen, where I could hear the distinctive clinking of her wine glass being filled to the rim. Caleb had vanished, likely sulking in his room or messaging someone for validation. Dad wasn't home yet, but I could already envision his reaction when he found out what had happened. Some overdramatic speech about betrayal, possibly with a false heart problem tossed in for pity. He'd always excelled at performative fury. The house was strangely silent after the purchasers left. I sat on the edge of the couch taking it all in. Every picture on the wall that I'd paid to have framed. The TV I'd purchased after Dad cracked the previous one during one of his outbursts. And the broken lamp in the corner from a fight Caleb provoked last Thanksgiving. All of it lay in silence like a museum exhibit titled Things Noah Paid For but was never allowed to touch. It was bizarre. Not sad, not nostalgic, just weird. That night I did not return to my residence. I stayed in the upstairs guest room, which Mom used to refer to as my pit stop, when I needed to feel like a true grown-up. I lay down, staring at the ceiling, and didn't fall asleep. Not due to stress, but rather for clarity. I awoke at 6 a.m. Dad yelled downstairs. "You're telling me he's selling it? You let him do this?" I did not move. I let them stew. When I eventually arrived, Dad was pacing the kitchen in an undershirt, phone in hand, most likely trying to call the bank, the police, or some long-forgotten cousin who might be a lawyer. Mom sat at the table, pale and quiet, as if the fight had been taken from her. She appeared older than she did the night before. "You want to explain what this is?" Dad said, flashing a printout of the listing that the realtor had emailed him following the showing. "I think the listing speaks for itself," I explained gently. He moved closer. "You can't just stop." I raised my hand. "Before you say anything you can't walk back, you should know that everything I've done is documented. I've got every payment, every bank transfer, every utility bill, the deed, the title, the insurance, the taxes." He opened his mouth. I cut him off. "And I've already spoken with a lawyer." That silenced him. "Where are we supposed to go?" Mom eventually said, her voice soft. It was the first actual inquiry someone had asked me in years, and it didn't sound like a demand or a guilt trip. I did not respond right away. I simply gazed at her. "You had 8 years," I remarked softly. 8 years to figure that out. 8 years of my income, my credit, my time. You could have saved, gotten jobs that lasted, treated me like a human being." She looked away. Dad slammed the mug down. "You're no better than the rest of them," he retorted, "turning your back on your family." "No," I replied, rising up. "I'm finally turning toward myself." Caleb crept down the stairs behind him, appearing uncertain. "Wait, are you actually serious? Like for real?" "Yes. But I live here. Not for long." He blinked like a child being told that Santa wasn't real. "I have nowhere else to go, man." I shrugged. Neither did I when I was sleeping on couches trying to keep the lights on in this house. But I figured it out. I went over to the counter and collected the envelope with the buyer's preliminary offer. 30 days, I answered. "That's how long the closing process takes. After that, I suggest you find your own way like I did." With that, I left. Not forever, yet. But for now that was sufficient. I had one final move to make, and it wasn't about selling the house. It was something larger. The offer ended exactly 31 days later. I signed the final paperwork at the attorney's office with the quiet, unwavering assurance I never had before, especially among my family. The realtor pushed the check across the table and I didn't even notice. It wasn't simply a payment. That was proof. Proof that I could construct something, own something, and complete something without having someone else's name stapled on top of it like a participation medal. I did not return to the house that day. I did not help them pack. I didn't check in to make sure everything was okay. I'd given them nearly a decade of those things and all I got back was snark, quiet, and debt. But I did leave one thing behind, a folder. Printed, not digital. I knew Dad would not open an email unless it was marked urgent and read. The folder contained a document titled Things You Claimed I Never Did. It contained a spreadsheet listing every dollar I'd paid on their behalf, including mortgage statements, grocery bills, health insurance payments, and credit card payoffs I'd made without their knowledge simply to keep their accounts open. Every Uber I had ordered during Mom's operation. Every textbook I had purchased for Caleb that he never opened. Every time I covered an overdraft fee so their lights wouldn't be turned off. There was even a screenshot of the birthday card I received captioned, "My thank you." I left it on the kitchen countertop. That was the last time I saw them. Within a week of the sale, the calls resumed. First Mom cried. Then Caleb bargained. Then Dad left angry voicemails about family betrayal and disgrace. I did not pick up. I didn't respond. Instead, I relocated. I quietly left the city, changed my phone number, and opened an account with a new bank. A new flat, contemporary, quiet, and bright, paid in full. There are no roommates. I had no housemates to raise anyway. For the first time in my adult life, I was debt-free. There are no secret bills to cover. There were no emergencies that required my pocketbook but never threatened my safety. I didn't know how light my chest felt until the second week went by with no calls begging for anything. I started going to therapy. Real therapy, not the kind in which you journal in a notebook that your mother accidentally reads. I started eating healthier, sleeping better. I enrolled in a pottery class on a whim, something I'd always wanted to do but never had time for due to extra shifts and family emergencies. 6 months after the transaction, I received a letter. There's no return address, just a wrinkled envelope forwarded to my previous billing address. It came from Caleb. The letter began like this. I still think you went too far. But I also get it now. He explained that he was living in a shared apartment across town, working part-time, cooking his own meals, and paying rent for the first time in his life. He said it sucked. He also stated that it was the first time he had realized what I must have been through. That was something he had not known. They informed him I enjoyed taking care of things. I needed to feel productive. He ended the letter with, I don't expect you to forgive us, but I hope someday you'll talk to me again, even if it's just to tell me I was a fool. I folded the letter and stored it in a drawer. Not prepared to answer. Not yet. But maybe someday. Mom and Dad never wrote. I doubt they ever will. And that is fine. Because I am no longer angry. I'm not bitter. I am free. They used to nickname me the family leech. But I was their lifeline. I finally let go. I don't walk on eggshells anymore. I walk on tile flooring. I chose myself in a place where no one deems me a failure for not buying groceries I never ate. I am at peace. I have space. And on my 31st birthday I purchased myself a nice card. It stated, Congratulations. You made it out. I signed it using my real name. That was sufficient.